The medical school application is a pretty daunting process, and there's a lot of things that I think you can do to make it a little easier. So today I'm going to talk about 5 things that I think you should do before you start your med school application. Let's talk about it. So the first thing I want to mention is physician shadowing. I think physician shadowing is extremely important for the med school application. Now there's some things on the application that I feel are kind of just like, oh, let me check the box and get it done. But physician shadowing should not be viewed that way. It's very important, it can be fun, and you can learn a lot from it. I think it's especially important today because there is so much hype about being a doctor from Netflix shows and social media and just kind of what you hear on a day-to-day basis about like how cool it is to be a doctor. And don't get me wrong, it really is, and I'm really excited that I have the opportunity to become a doctor, but I also know that it's not as dramatic and extreme as some shows and social media platforms show it to be. And that's why shadowing is really important, because you can go and be with a doctor for an entire day and see what the actual day-to-day life is like. It's not always just these crazy cases going on where you're saving lives left and right. There's some little mundane tasks you have to chart, you have to go meet with patients, take histories, things like that. And television and social media doesn't really show that side of being a doctor because honestly, it's not as exciting. Ways to get more shadowing hours are to just go and contact your local hospitals and see if there are any doctors willing to let you come and shadow them for a day or for a few hours or whatever fits your availability and obviously the availability of the doctors. But I do know that some hospitals are becoming a little more strict on who they allow to come into their hospitals. And so there are online like e-shadowing programs that you can do, and you can count those hours for your med school application. And I don't know a whole lot of details about that, but whatever information I have on that, I will put in the description. And then one other probably less common way to get shadowing hours is sometimes schools will provide a class that kind of focuses on pre-meds and shadowing. So I had one during my undergrad that I took, and it was really great. It was taught by a surgeon at a local hospital, and he set up different shadowing opportunities for the students in that class. And so if that's an option at your university or maybe even high school, I don't know if that is something that's available, but you can check with your school and see if that's something that you can do. So the next thing is saving up money. Unfortunately, money is a factor when you're applying to med school, and it's not really cheap, but it's not like incredibly expensive either. So the way it works is that when you submit your primary application, it's $170 to just submit it to one school, and then every other school after that is $40. So taking a look at some numbers here. The average number of schools that a student applied to last year was 16. And so with that, the average cost for that primary application would be around $770. I applied to 22 schools, so you can do the math on that if you want. And then there's the secondaries, which is an additional cost, obviously, and that one is not as just uniform. It kind of depends school to school. So looking at that, the average secondary cost is about $100, but it can range anywhere from $20 on the cheap end to about $150. And so it can be anywhere from like $320 all the way up to $2,400 if you had all top tier like secondary prices and you sent them to all your schools. So it really can vary. So then looking at just the total average cost, it can be anywhere from like $1,090 to $3,170. And then like the actual average of all the numbers that I went through is $2,370. So yeah, it's not cheap. So that's why I would recommend trying to save up some money for your actual application. Now I do know that some schools will provide scholarships or some kind of assistance in paying for a application for med school, as well as the AAMC. They have some kind of program that helps in paying those costs for the primary application submission. And I'm not sure about the secondary, but I'll look into it. And if I find anything, I will be sure to put any links to any useful information. I think that it's really important to kind of look at an application in its whole to see what you're going to be doing for your application. And so I have a video that has my entire application on it if you want to check that out. But being a little more specific, I think it's really important to know what activities you're going to put on the application. So if you're not super familiar with it, you can list 15 activities that you have done in your life that have kind of shaped who you are or impacted you, or just things that you really like to do. And of those 15, you can submit 3 of them as what's called the most meaningful experiences. And you get to have an extra like 2,000 characters, I think, to describe that. So on all 15, you're going to describe what the activity is, and you can say how it impacted you. But then on those 3 most meaningful, you get to talk more about it, why you chose it to be a most meaningful. So I think it's really important to not only just know what 15 activities you're going to do, but also know what your 3 main activities will be, or your 3 most meaningful activities. And my activities, honestly, I think were a big part of why I was accepted to the med school that I got accepted to. I've talked about that in the past. And so your activities can really set you apart, and it can really make you stand out in the eyes of the admissions committees and help you get that acceptance. Now, this is something that I learned the hard way, but you need to research the med schools that you're going to apply to before you actually submit your application to them. And now that sounds kind of like obvious and, oh, of course I'm going to research the med schools. But a lot of people will just use the MSAR tool, which is I believe it's the Med School Admissions Requirements tool that the AAMC has. And it will just show you kind of the average numbers of people who got there. So like their average GPA, the average MCAT, how many like shadowing hours the applicants had, things like that. And while that's a good place to start, that really should not be your main reason to apply to a school. And I say that because a lot of schools will then ask you in secondary applications, why do you specifically want to come to this school? And you can't really just say, oh, it's because my stats match your school. That's not a good answer, and it really, I don't think, would get you accepted. And so you need to go and look on the school's websites and figure out what their mission statements are, figure out if there's any specialties that they have or things that you think will make you thrive. Just some quick, very specific examples, but this is like the things you need to look for. At George Washington, where I am, they have a very heavy emphasis on public policy and like health policy. And that was something that I was really interested in, and I kind of focused on that in my primary application, but then I talked more about it in my secondary application and then also in the interview that I got from them. And then another example is, I believe at Colorado University, they have like a faster preclinical years. I think it's only like 1 or 1.5 years as opposed to what normally 2. And so that could be something that if you're interested in, you could talk about that. But yeah, don't just rely on the MSAR, do some research on the schools and know why you want to apply there so that you can answer that question when it comes. Now this last thing, I might be the only person who didn't know this, but there is a big database of the school's secondary applications. And so the reason that this is important is because you can pre-write pretty much all of your secondary applications in little batches. So if you've done the research and you know what schools you're going to apply to, you can then go and look at what their secondary application essays are going to be like. And usually they don't change year from year. Sometimes there's little modifications, but these databases that track all this have the questions already for you, and you can go and write them out before you even actually receive the secondary. I did not know this. And so when I started getting my secondaries, I would get like 15 right away, and then like 6, and then another 3 or whatever it was. And so I would have like 100 essays that I would have to write within a month period. And it was brutal, honestly. So I would recommend against that. Definitely recommend against doing that. It'll save you time in the long run, and it can give you more time to actually write the essays, because sometimes the schools will have a deadline of like 2 weeks once you get it. And so if you've already looked at it like a month before, then you have more time to actually refine it and make it that pristine essay that you want to submit. And so there's a lot of those databases that I was talking about that have the secondary essays already there for you. And so I'll put those links in the description so that you can go and look at those and start planning that out if you are planning on applying this next cycle. Okay, so those are 5 things that I would really highly recommend doing before you start your med school application. A few of them I did, a few of them I didn't, and I made mistakes, and that's why I'm sharing this, because I don't want anybody else to make those mistakes, because it can really hurt you on your application. I think my med school list was really bad, and that could have hurt me. And I didn't plan my secondaries, and so I was really struggling with writing so many essays all at once. And so I hope this saves you some time. It kind of saves you from the stress of what the application is like. And if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. So let me know. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.